Hey, everybody. Hopefully you have listened to our episode on Doctor Who, The Weeping Angels of Mons from 2014-2015 by Titan Comics. And now it is time for the after show.
Show. What noise does the sonic screwdriver make? Is it supposed to be kind of a...
It's more like a
Oh, it's kind of more of a low hum. Okay.
Yeah, it's more of a hum. It's sonic. You know, like toothbrush.
I want it to be I want it to sound like an original series tricorder or something like that. Something very like wacky and over the top. I don't know.
Well, it's really weird because like it's literally just, you know, a handheld thing, and somehow the doctor looks at it and he's able to see either some kind of readings or display or get information from it. And I haven't figured out how, because there's no like LED or readout or anything.
Right.
It's literally just like a pen. Actually, this one is a pen. It like writes in ink that you can only see with the shiny end. But but it like opens up and then it's like this clear little, you know, whatever thing. But how do you, oh yeah, it's definitely, you know, 25 gigawatts or whatever, 1.21 gigawatts.
Maybe
how do you
it
tell?
beams
I don't
the
know.
signals into his Gallifreyan brain.
I mean, they do have a translation circuit, like the TARDIS gets in your head when you fly in it, and then you get out and you can read or speak any language, which is very convenient for the show. But you know, it could be something like that where it's like the sonic screwdriver just gets in your head and you know things by scanning.
UT of Doctor Who, Universal Translator.
Yes, exactly. All right, so this is the after show. So we are going to talk about Doctor Who. No, Doctor Who.
Doctor Who.
Whoa,
totally other character.
We're not gonna.
And the only I don't have any Doctor Who
show
memorabilia, but I do have Dr. Fate.
Ah, so, he's a big
head. He has little green energy orbs in his hand. You can't really see them because they're kind of out of focus, but yeah, very excited with that. I found all of the pop vinyls from the Black Adam movie. There's Atom Smasher.
Wow.
That they were on sale for like $5 each. So I ended up getting Hawkman's.
Nice! Hawkman!
And Atom Smasher, and of course Typhoon. Nice. And then Black Adam and Dr. Fate as well. So I don't know. And if you haven't listened to that episode, you should go back and listen to it, because it's very good. But
do that after you finish this one.
Doctor Who, yes. Don't stop this one.
Exactly. Listen to all of them. And then once you're done, listen to all of them again. And hit the like button and subscribe and give us all kinds of comments.
And then recite them to people and they'll be impressed with you. And
don't you remember in season 2, episode 3, when Joe and Mike were reviewing this, they made this joke. And so what I said was a reference to that joke.
Yeah, it'll keep you very relevant at like the cocktail parties you go to. So
well, we stay relevant. Like we talked about how Twitter is now X, and you know, we talked about the writer's strike, which is now over, and you know, kind of all those things. So we stay current.
We do.
Yeah.
Current events with Mike and Joe. Today we're talking about the comic that we currently reviewed, which is Doctor Who. Actually, we're not. We're talking about Doctor Who, the franchise.
No. We are. So the original Doctor Who actually ran for 26 seasons of various lengths that encompass more than 150 stories and over 500 episodes. So this was between November 1963 and December 1989. So by the time that we were born, Doctor Who was already on the air for quite a long time. And then
it sounds like it was kind of on its way out.
Yeah. So it went kind of out in 1989. Then there was in 1993, a 2-part made-for-charity mini adventure aired, which reunited a bunch of like past cast members together. So there's a lot of this kind of in Doctor Who's history where we have the main sort of continuity of episodes, and then we have spin-offs, we have kind of made for charity events, we have sort of mini like one-shot stories, we have Christmas celebrations, we have like all kinds of other stuff that's like you can't really say if it's canon or not canon, because Doctor Who is always, you know, kind of changing, that really anything could happen at any time.
Sure.
So they're really episodic a lot of times, where things don't necessarily cross over with other things. So you don't really know if something is canon or not, as far as these like additional kind of side stories go.
Well, I can only assume that there wasn't a lot of hard serialization in the stories,
Well, yeah,
between the
back
60s
then,
and,
especially not.
80s either. I mean, definitely the more modern shows, what year did Eccleston's Doctor Who come on the scene and like revive it?
Yeah, that was 2005. So
okay,
that
yeah.
was,
So there you go. So you're talking, yeah, good portion of our lives where it didn't exist. But whenever they did that, it was definitely veering more towards like modern TV, as far as we're going to tell like a season long arc, or something like that. So
yeah. So I'm going to kind of go through the Doctors a little bit and sort of give like a little overview for anybody who's kind of just been curious about some of the old stuff from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I've watched a fair amount of it. Like, I kind of did some picking and choosing. There were a couple episodes, because the 2005 series especially made references to a lot of the old Who. And so I wanted to kind of see, okay, what is some of the stuff that they're referencing? Who are some of these characters? Like when Sarah Jane Smith comes back and the Doctor is freaking out like a fanboy, why? Well, because she was a companion years and years and years and years ago with one of the previous Doctors. And so like I watched some of those, and it was actually one of the companions who came up with the name for the TARDIS as far as an acronym goes, like time and relative dimension and space. It was a companion who first said that. So it's like kind of weird, because that should have been something that the Doctor, his race came up with.
One would think, yeah.
Yeah. So in anything that's been on the air for a long time and retconned and changed, continuity quite a bit. So there's a lot of stuff that they hadn't established in those old shows that, in modern continuity, they say has just kind of always been that way. And that it gets really hard, especially when you start introducing something as convoluted as time travel, because then it's like, well, which reality and version of events is the one that's, truly within our universe, where things played out this way and alternate dimensions and, so on and so forth. So it is a TV show, so it's going to be wrong. It's going to make its own continuity wrong from time to time. It's just kind of the nature of the beast.
Well, I would say, in rebuttal to that, they have kind of a concept in Doctor Who that there are certain events that are fixed points in time that can't be changed no matter what? Isn't that like a core Doctor Who thing?
Yeah, and it's kind of like it's sort of the story element that keeps them, like, you go through a sequence of events and you're like, okay, so the big bad was revealed to be X. And if we had known this from the beginning of the episode, we could have totally prevented all of this tragedy. So let's just hop in our time machine that can literally go anywhere in time and space, go back and just restart everything that they did. So there has to be some sort of ground rules for time travel that prevent us from just undoing everything and making everything all neat and tidy. And so one of those is the concept of fixed events, where it's like something happens. It's kind of like Flashpoint, where it's like his mother getting killed, Barry Allen's mother getting killed, is kind of like the Flashpoint, or the fixed event that if you undo that, it's just going to unravel so many other things that the reality that you get is just completely different. So you have this fixed event, which is an excuse for, I can't tamper with this because it has to play out this way. And like, you can't travel along your own timeline. So we can't just go back and see ourselves, 2 hours ago and give us critical information that we could have used to defeat whatever. Like, hey, don't blink. Like, oh, now that I know not to blink, everything's going to be fine. But I, had to figure that out through this episode. But now that I know it, I'm good. But you can't travel on your own timeline.
It looks like the TARDIS was wanting to go somewhere other than here.
A little bit of turbulence there. Well, and, talking with my hands, I kind of bump things quite a bit.
TARDIS!
So I heard this really funny, there was I think a forum post or something where they're like, oh, it's Dr. Pooh, and they're like, Dr. Pooh and the TARDIS. So,
oh, what great fans you have, Doctor Who.
yes. Well, at least they're nicer than Star Wars fans, because Star Wars
Yeah,
fans are very mean. And when
they
you
can
talk
be.
about continuity and different versions of things, they can get very upset at you about what you like. And if you mention Disney, it's either love or hate.
Yeah. I will say that I have found people that I've encountered at conventions and stuff that are in the Doctor Who fandom to generally be pretty chill people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the one thing they do that really irks me is if there's somebody from Doctor Who appearing, they will sit through 4 panels of other people that they don't care about to save those seats and then be there for the Doctor Who person. So I'm like, well, I really wanted to see Sean Astin from Lord of the Rings, but all the Whovians were in there, or Hoovers, or whatever they're called. No, that's a
Hoovers,
vacuum.
Hoovians, yes.
Whovians are in there, and I'm like, I can't get a seat. So, but that doesn't seem to be happening quite so much lately. So
Maybe you should have brought some potatoes.
maybe, mash them, boil them, and bake them in a stew.
Exactly. Well, anyway, instead of a stew, let's talk about Doctor Who. So the first Doctor was originally played by an actor named William Hartnell from 1963 to 1966. He was an English actor, which most of them were until kind of the modern Who, where we started to have some variation. So he was originally uncertain about accepting this part because it was pitched to him more as like a children's series. And this guy had been in a lot of like gruff military roles and had become typecast as an actor. So it was kind of like an interesting thing for him to take on this role. And so it was very much like a very, kind of teaching type show when it first took off. And so originally they were in black and white, but then they have since like added color to them and kind of not really remastered, but kind of made them more watchable to the modern eye, I guess you would say. So unfortunately, he was an old guy when he started Doctor Who, and so his health actually began to deteriorate during shooting of the show to where he couldn't, learn his lines, and it just started getting worse and worse. So at that point, they kind of had to figure out, okay, we have the show that's doing really well, but this actor, unfortunately, is just not able to continue on. So how can we continue the series on? And so that's where actually a script editor proposed, well, the Doctor is an alien. We've established that. So what if he could die and return in a new body? Then we could bring on another actor. So then the producer took this further by saying, well, this Doctor can do this renewal thing regularly where he can transform, even from an older man to a younger one. This would allow for the convenient recasting of the role whenever necessary. So they were, kind of planning for the future there, which I don't think they had any idea that it'd be continuing until, 2023 and beyond.
Right.
But it's a really cool concept that like we can keep the same character and just have a different actor and it's okay, as opposed to James Bond, where it's like the continuity restarts or changes pretty much whenever a new actor takes on the James Bond role. This is something that like, this is the same continuity. We're just, hey, he's 300 years old, he's 400, he's 500, and we just keep counting the same character. So supposedly this process of regeneration, is what we call it now, was modeled on LSD trips, with the experience being like the hell and dank horror of taking this drug. So I did not live in the 60s and neither did you. So I'm just going to leave that one where it is.
That's pretty groovy.
All I know is he did a little too much LDS and he was part of the free speech movement back in the 60s, according to Star Trek 4. So,
and I like Italian, and so do you.
And so do you. Yes.
Yes.
You're just going to leave him there in the park? It's his way.
Like, that's an explanation. It's his way.
It's his way. It's really funny because like we interject Star Trek wherever we can because we really enjoy it and it's so applicable to other franchises. But I feel like with this Doctor Who thing episode, Star Trek keeps coming up like a lot.
I more than normal, and I think just the nature of it being another sci-fi series that's lasted, it's really stood the test of time. I mean, there's not too many franchises out there that have lasted as long as Trek and Doctor Who. I mean, they're pretty much they've both been around longer than Star Wars, and anything else that I can think of. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just easy to draw comparisons because that's kind of where my mind goes when I start getting into time travel and sci-fi stuff. So
yeah. Well, our second Doctor from 1966 to 1969 was played by Patrick Troughton. And so he was cast because of his extensive and versatile experience as a character actor. So to kind of continue what the previous actor started, but also kind of portray it differently in sort of like his own version. So this has got to be a really cool thing for an actor to say, you are playing an established character who has all this established, lore. And at the time it was only a couple of years, but and this history and everything. And you remember everything that was on the show, but you have free reign to kind of take the character in any direction that you want to go and make it your own. Like, this isn't you're playing a young Captain Kirk, and so you have to stay within the parameters, but you can tweak it a little bit. This is like, you can kind of go any direction. So they wanted to portray this next actor to be this next version of Doctor Who to be very different than the, kind of old guy teaching science learning kind of thing. And so they wanted to go with a cosmic hobo in the mold of Charlie Chaplin. And so he's younger, and he's very much like kind of goofy. He plays the recorder and is very different than the first Doctor. And the actor kind of shunned publicity, rarely gave interviews. But during one interview, he did say, "I think acting is magic. If I tell you all about myself, it will spoil it." And that's kind of all you could get from him. So
I will say about the cosmic hobo thing, I would really like to be in the room for the pitch meeting where the writers are like, so we've got this idea for the next season of Doctor Who, and they're having to like convince the money men that like that's the direction they should go.
That's kind of similar to on Seinfeld, where they actually, so like Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian, has a TV show where he plays Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian, but all the people around him are different, people playing different actors. But in the show, they actually have the idea that, hey, we could have our own TV show, and it's going to be about Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian. So it's kind of like, multi-layered. But one of the characters proposes the show is about nothing. It's literally a show about nothing. Well, what happens on this show? Absolutely nothing. And so they go through all these pitch meetings, and they're trying to write a script, and it's kind of like that, like hilarious, where it's like, what are you even selling here? Nothing. Well, okay, I get that it's nothing, but something has to happen, right? Cosmic hobo. Okay, but what does that mean? What does he do?
That's funny, because if you had to tell me what Seinfeld was about, describing it as a show about nothing is pretty accurate. There's not really a core idea. It's just kind of like, this is what the gang gets into this week, and that's the show. So
well, and it's a show from the 90s, so there's a lot of being absolutely sexist and some racist stuff and here and there. So it totally wouldn't fly today. But the concept of being a show about nothing is pretty funny.
It is.
So we get to our third Doctor, John Pertwee, who is the father of Sean Pertwee, who played Alfred on the TV show Gotham from 2014 to 2019.
Wow.
So that was kind of cool.
So does he also have the kind of like Cockney accent then? Okay.
Yeah. So he was the Doctor from 1970 to 1974. He apparently also did some voice for some character in Fable 3 in 2010. I really don't remember it well enough to say who that character was, but I did find that on his list of credits.
Become king, and you can be either a cruel or a good king.
Yeah.
But that's all I really remember.
There's like a sergeant or a captain or something that he voiced. So anyway, unlike the previous regeneration, this one was actually forced on the Doctor as a punishment, because he was dealing with the Time Lords, who were very much active at the time, and the Doctor being sort of the rebel of the group. This was a forced regeneration as punishment because they just couldn't stand the second incarnation anymore, and so they moved him on. But I really like this era of Doctor Who because it's heavily influenced by like the James Bond type, films.
Oh, okay.
And so he's a crusader with a penchant for action and fancy clothes. And then he gets exiled to Earth because, again, he's being punished. So they're like, well, you love this Earth so much, so you're just going to be stuck on Earth and you can't go anywhere, which is funny because they kind of do that on Modern Who, except it isn't a punishment. He just sort of does that of his own volition. It seems like, look, I'm in London again. Look, I'm back in London. Here we are in London. Oh, now we're in New York.
He doesn't go to other planets very often. I wonder if that was a cost-saving measure from behind the scenes where they were like, we need to stop showing a new alien planet every week. So if we can find a way to keep him on Earth, that would be great. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I think they were trying to keep the production budget low in the beginning. Yeah. I mean, since then they've gone to all kinds of crazy planets, but what happens a lot of times too is he goes back with the companion to their current time, wherever they're living. And so something bad has to happen to them when they go back to the present. Sure. It can't just be like a lovely, fun little trip. Something bad has to happen. So that's some of it too.
I was going to ask you, by the time we got to the 70s, had it moved out of its like educational kids programming phase?
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. This one is a lot more like I said, kind of James Bond-esque, and he actually serves as a scientific advisor to this organization called UNIT, which was originally called the United Nations Intelligence Task Force, which they then changed in Modern Who to the Unified Task Force because you didn't want to have United Nations in the title because that kind of gets a little tricky. So back then it wasn't as big of a deal.
Show me the unit.
Yes, but we're not going to go there because this is a clean comic book podcast. So there's also a character that they introduced called Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, who is a very prominent figure that he interacts with quite a bit as far as UNIT goes. So he interacts with the military here a lot, and so they're always saluting him. And they use guns and he doesn't use guns, and it's like all this kind of controversy that they do. And it's really cool because in Tennant's run they sort of give some hints to this. Like they have UNIT in there, and then like later, I think in the Jodie Whittaker run, she actually meets up with the Brigadier's like great granddaughter or something, who is now in charge of UNIT. So they kind of keep that sort of thing going, which is pretty neat.
Okay,
but UNIT is kind of like they're kind of like SHIELD in the Marvel universe.
Sure.
It's funny too because it's a word and then it's actually an acronym for some sort of force, so it's kind of similar that way. But I mean, they are formed because they realize that there are alien threats and they need to be able to fight these threats. And the Doctor, who they realize is on their side, knows like everything that they would need to know about any of the aliens that are going to invade. So they need his help. So they kind of partner with him in that aspect. So it's kind of an interesting, but so again, the Doctor
stuck in one point in time then during this era too.
Pretty well, yeah. I think he kind of
aliens are just coming from wherever, like every episode.
I've only
deal with.
Like when I watch this, I kind of would pick and choose some episodes because again, this being from the 70s is like kind of hard to watch in the modern sense. So
and there's so much of it, you would almost want to do like a curated list of like what are the best episodes to watch.
Exactly. So I haven't seen everything, so maybe he does leave it at some point or goes to check something else out, but for the most part it's kind of like Earth based, and maybe he sneaks away here and there, but yeah, he's kind of stuck that's the best helping UNIT.
This is like maybe a hot take and it's not really related, but I think that's the best way to watch the X-Files too, is to watch like a curated list of like, here are the episodes that matter for the continuity, because there's a lot of filler on the X-Files.
There's a lot of filler. Yeah. So that takes us up to the fourth Doctor, Tom Baker. So Tom Baker is very different than some of the previous Doctors. He kind of started the trend. I don't know, the others, like they all have sort of a trademark look, but he has this long scarf that's like multicolored, And then he has this really deep voice, and it's like a really deep British voice. And he goes, "You want a jelly baby? You want a jelly baby?" He gives out candy. "Would you like a jelly baby?" I mean, yeah. Maybe I'm not doing it justice, but
that was a little more Austin Powers than Tom Baker, I think.
Yeah, well,
I
I
want
suck
the
at
jelly baby.
Oh, behave. Yeah, like Austin Powers. Oh, okay. Well, anyway, go check out Tom Baker for yourself, because obviously I do a really bad impersonation. But
no, that was funny.
So a cool bit of trivia I found out is that his iconic scarf was actually created by accident. The costume designer that was assigned to his first story gave way too much wool to the knitter, because they wanted to give her, like, okay, here's a bunch of color options.
Sure.
So here's a bunch of stuff to knit together. And so the knitter is like, okay, here's a bunch of stuff to knit, so I'll just knit it. And she took all the color choices and just knitted them together in a long scarf. And so that's where he got his kind of iconic look from. So that was kind of fun.
Isn't it? I mean, and I don't want to like delay this too long, but I love that, because I love hearing these stories about like creative people where things that become iconic later are just complete accidents.
Yeah.
That it's like, this just happened and then we ran with it. You know, there's some, I mean, even there's an Aquaman story that I read where the penciler was Spanish, and the writer Peter David was, you know, living in the United States, and they were communicating, you know, not super well because of the language barrier. And so Peter David was like, so in this story, this meteor comes down and hits Atlantis, and that's like part of what caused their fall. But the way it was translated into Spanish, it was like Death's Head or something like this. So the artist like drew a giant, like terrifying skull on the meteor that was coming down. And then Peter David was like, that's actually cooler than what I thought of. So now I'll have to come up with a reason why the meteor looked evil and looked like it was alive. But I love that kind of stuff. Like, that's fun when collaborative people can like have the what is it? Just be bendable enough that they can go like, you know what, let's go with this. That's better than what we were gonna do, you know?
You know, it's so funny that you said bendable, because so Tom Baker actually lended his voice to the Star Wars Rebels show, where he played a character called Bendu, who is neither on the side of the light or the dark. He is the one in the middle. And he actually helps Kanan Jarrus kind of find himself and recenter himself after some traumatic events that happen in the show. So it was funny that you said you like them to be bendy, because I was like, well, he plays a character named Bendu, so that's kind of funny. But he also did a lot of comedic scripting suggestions and ad libs. So he got to sort of, you know, do that thing where you add stuff to the show, and you're really making it your own now, not just as an actor portraying, but as far as the writing goes too. So that's kind of neat. And this series really received a lot of the like highest viewing figures and marks, and this is like, most people I think who like classic Who, this is their favorite, if not, you know, second favorite Doctor. And he was also the longest serving actor in the part. He actually had this for 7 seasons.
Oh wow.
So,
yeah, that's much longer than anybody in modern memory.
Yeah, even in modern.
Yeah.
So he's also done some other voice acting work besides Rebels. In the video game Medieval Resurrection, he did a voice there.
Oh, I played that.
Yeah. And a couple others too. So
Daniel Fortescue.
I'm sure if you listen to his voice on like YouTube somewhere, you might be able to recognize where it is in the game, assuming it's not a minor role. I didn't write down who it was because I hadn't played the game, but
yeah.
So we kind of made the shift from, you know, this being sort of an educational children's show to being more serious, to going into James Bond and military. And so at this point, it started to get a lot more violent. Like there were actually some concerns over the tone and, you know, kind of like where we were going with the show, because it was starting to get very violent. So this is where a lot of the question came into, okay, how is the show going to keep going? And are we going to keep watching it? So this takes us to the fifth Doctor, Peter Davison, sorry, from 82 to 84, who took the role at age 29, which at the time was the youngest actor to have ever played the role. He has since been taken over by Matt Smith, who was, I think, like 26 when he started. Yeah. And so, fun fact, Matt Smith, I know we're not there yet, but Matt Smith was actually born 4 days after me, like same year.
Whoa.
He was born on the 28th of October. I was born on the 24th. So that was kind of cool.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So Peter Davison,
is he, but he's younger than us though, right? Like
who?
Matt Smith? Matt
Doctor
Smith.
Who? Matt Smith?
Yeah.
No, he's 4
the
days
same
young.
year and everything.
He's 4 days younger. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The same year.
Gotcha.
So
gotcha.
4 days younger than me.
Oh, wow.
Obviously, you know.
Yeah.
Month and whatever change.
Yeah. Right.
For you, but yes. So Davison. So Troughton, who played the second Doctor, so we're at the point now where this has been on for so long that we have sort of the next generation of people. So Davison actually watched, as a teenager, watched Doctor Who on TV. So he wanted to, you know, be in this role and sort of like as a fan now getting to, you know, take over this role. And so Troughton actually said like, hey, you know, you probably only get like a couple good years with the show. I'd say you leave after 3 years, call it quits after 3. And so he did, because he didn't want to be typecast. So that's why he was only from like 82-ish to 84-ish.
Sure.
And next we have Colin Baker from 84 to 86. Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, about the fifth Doctor. So having a unique outfit, it was very kind of like light cream colored, but on his lapel, he had a stalk of celery.
What?
And I couldn't really get into any of like his episodes, so I can't really tell you how or why that came about, but there is a crossover. It's not an official episode. I think it's one of those like mini kind of side episodes or whatever, but I think it's David Tennant who meets him or something like that, because he says, not everybody can pull off a vegetable or something, like, because he has a vegetable like on his outfit. It's so weird.
That's so strange.
But so Colin Baker was from 84 to 86, and this is where we had an interruption. So first there was an 18-month hiatus in 85, midway through his first full season. So he comes on, and halfway through his first season, we take a break because of ratings and the network execs in charge at the time.
Yeah.
And then they actually decided to remove him from the part after only starring in 11 episodes and just short of 3 years in the series, including the hiatus. So his tenure as Doctor was pretty well the shortest at that point. I think Eccleston now is the shortest because he was only there for a year. So this is where we also kind of start the trend of a lot of these guys either left due to not great circumstances, or they just were like, okay, we're done or whatever. But then sort of not even Modern Who, even before that, we started doing some kind of crossover episodes where the Doctor does cross over his own time stream and he meets previous versions of himself. And outside of the kind of, again, main episodes, the spin-offs, the mini series, the one-offs, the Christmas specials, there's also a ton of audio dramas, like just ridiculous amount of audio dramas.
And they
count?
Out there. They're part of like it's kind of iffy.
I don't know that they necessarily count or don't count, because there's really not a whole lot of, like, there's an overarching story in some of the Doctor Who seasons or series, but there's not really, I don't think that you can really have an additional thing that really like wrecks something unless you say, oh, he's not a Time Lord, or, oh no, he doesn't have 2 hearts, he has 3, or you know, something like that. But it just, there's so much potential with the character that you can kind of do whatever you want, and it can fit wherever, because he's kind of ageless. So
yeah, that's definitely part of the appeal.
Yeah, man, I keep dropping my stuff over here. I get excited and I just start knocking it over.
I meant to ask you about the 3D glasses.
Yeah.
What's the deal with the 3D glasses?
So this was a really fun moment in Tennant's era where he just shows up wearing these 3D glasses. And so you kind of just like are like, well, the Doctor's quirky and, you know, he's just being weird. And so he has this on for like quite a while until, what is it that happens? There's something like the story actually comes up that there's something going on that people can't like see, because there's this thing that's affecting people and nobody can see it. But the doctor's been aware of this and he's been looking for it. So that's why he was wearing the 3D glasses, because he actually, I think, puts them on Rose at one point and like shows like, oh, look. And then you see through the glasses that you can see this thing that no one else is able to see. And so you're like, oh, so there was a point to it. It wasn't just being weird.
That's very Doctor Who. That's
yeah.
And you're describing these episodes and like it's starting to come back to me. But when I watched this stuff was like over a decade ago now. And so I'm thinking back to it and I'm just like, what did that happen? I remember David Tennant meeting his actual future wife on the show, but she was playing the character of his daughter or something.
The doctor's daughter.
I remember that. I don't remember a lot, but I remember that because it was super weird.
It was weird. Oh, it was like this military planet where they were running out of people. So what they did was they had this cloning machine that what it did was it created an offspring for you. So that way they could serve in the fight the war that was going on, that I think either the war was over or something weird was going on with, I mean, it's Doctor Who, everything that's going on is weird, but
yeah, I remember her wearing like combat fatigues of some kind.
Yeah. So, and it like programmed them with like military training so that way they could go to battle. So she picks up a giant gun and she's like, here we go. And he's like, no, don't do that. And yeah, that was funny. Yeah. So, I mean, we've had like what, 18 years of modern Who. I mean, we're coming up on a 20th anniversary just of the like, since they brought it back in 2005.
That's pretty incredible.
It is very incredible. So before we get there, we have to talk about Sylvester McCoy, who was Doctor Who from 1987 through 1989, which a lot of people may more recognize him as Radagast from The Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
So a little bit of trivia there. He was
brown bird poop wizard. Yes.
Yes. Radagast the brown poop wizard. He was actually the second choice for Bilbo Baggins behind Ian Holm.
Really?
And Ian Holm had actually played Frodo in a BBC radio series 20 years before the Lord of the Rings.
That's crazy.
So that was kind of interesting. Sylvester McCoy, I don't really have a whole lot to say about him. I haven't watched a whole lot of his episodes either. A lot of this, like, I was surprised because I kind of enjoyed the like 70s Doctor Who more so than I enjoyed the 80s Doctor Who, which is really strange because I enjoy a lot of stuff from the 80s and not as much from the 70s. So that was kind of interesting for me to discover. But viewers at the time must have felt the same way because the series had dwindling viewership. The showrunners on the show at the time were headhunted by other networks and they didn't hire any replacements. So the TV series got canceled.
Wow.
That's it. So this is like, the TV show wasn't all there was, because there were comics, magazines, other publications where there were Doctor Who stories being told. And as long as they had a general likeness of one of the previous iterations, they could kind of use those characters in whatever stories that they wanted without really, you know, again, damaging any type of continuity. So,
yeah, well, one thing I noticed just about the comic book that we read is they would have like some variant covers in there where it always seemed like they had the actual actor posing for like some kind of cover. Yeah. And I was like, did they actually have Tennant go through and do that? Or is that like a, you know, Photoshop mock-up or something? Because they had like an actress playing Gabby as well, like on one of the covers. And I'm just like, well, she was never in the show as far as I know, but they hired somebody obviously to do that. So yeah, it seems like the extended universe of Doctor Who is very like, is just as rich as like what's on TV. So
yeah, and especially the audio dramas. Like I tried listening to one, but it's really weird because like one I listened to with David Tennant, he's narrating and he's kind of speaking other people's parts and he's speaking the part of the Doctor. So it's weird to hear that one voice telling the whole story when his voice really is just the Doctor.
And they all sound like Scrooge McDuck.
Well, I mean, his Scottish accent worked really well for Scrooge
Well, yeah,
McDuck.
of course it did.
That was, I really enjoyed that. He has a really
Yeah.
cool. He actually did get to use his Scottish accent in one episode. I think it
Mhm.
was with Rose Tyler. They went somewhere in Scotland,
Yeah.
and it's funny because like he was faking a Scottish accent, and so he actually slips up because he's talking to Rose and he doesn't use his accent, and I don't know, Queen of England or whoever's there
Sure.
is like, oh, I just noticed your accent change. Where did it go? And it's funny because he's a Scottish guy faking an English accent for this show who is playing a character with an English accent who's faking a Scottish accent. And at one point Rose tries to like mock a Scottish accent and she does it really poorly. And like the doctor's like, don't do that. No, just stop, just stop. But it's funnier, you know, getting that like he's a Scottish actor, you know,
for
that
sure.
kind of thing. So anyway, yeah, Doctor Who took a really big break as far as TV series went, and then they decided to revive it for a TV movie in 1996 starring Paul McGann, which aired both on the BBC and the Fox network in North America. And unfortunately, there were disappointing US figures. It actually did pretty well in the UK, but it was disappointing in the US. And so they were trying to, like, the BBC didn't have enough resources to take it on as a series. They needed like a network sponsor.
Oh, I
So
see.
Fox was like, no, this didn't work out well for us. We're not going to pick this up. And so Doctor Who went on another hiatus, this time until 2005 when it was revived with Modern Who.
So what year was that? That was 93?
96.
96. There's even more. So yeah, in 1996, you've got a lot of sci-fi competition on the air. And that we were kind of in like the sci-fi renaissance at that point, where there were like every network had a sci-fi show. You've got Babylon 5 and Deep Space Nine and Voyager all running. The Next Generation movies are happening. We're not far off from Star Wars coming back, what, in like 99 for the Phantom Menace. You know, I mean, the X-Files would have still been going. Yeah, I think that would have been a hard to like break into the American sci-fi market at that point, because there's just a lot.
Well, especially because this was like, oh, here's another incarnation of the Doctor, and he's trying to figure himself out, and now he's fighting the Master, who's like a, you know, mustache twirly villain, and all of this stuff. And it's like, it's a funny movie for the 90s, but if you've never seen Doctor Who, especially because, you know, it was just all the old stuff until this point, none of the Modern Who obviously existed. Seeing this kind of out of context in the middle of nowhere was probably like, this is really weird and it really doesn't do anything new for me. And I think if they would have leaned into the sci-fi aspect of this guy is a Time Lord and they're regenerations and went through a montage of all the Doctors morphing through each other in some really bad 90s CGI, I think that would have been more enticing to audiences of like, wow, this is a really unique sci-fi concept that is pretty cool. But
instead
it was more
of let's
just a step
throw
on
them in and
because going back and watching it now, I actually liked it. I thought it was fun. Like, it was corny and cheesy and everything you expect from the 90s, but it was like the closest, you know, kind of American version of Doctor Who that we could get without ruining it by making it an American version. Like, anytime we make an American version of a really awesome British show or UK show or whatever, it usually doesn't translate very well.
Crowd.
you just can't change the formula. The formula works. Keep the formula. Back to formula. Anyway, so that
sorry.
Yes, so that takes us up to the 2005, where now we have Christopher Eccleston, who only stayed for a year. We have David Tennant, who was there for I think like 4 years, 4 to 5.
I thought it was only 3, but maybe I'm wrong. I think
it was 4.
Was it only 3 seasons that took place that took like 4 or 5 years to play out or something?
Pretty sure it was 4 series.
It was actually 4.
Oh wow. Seasons, but okay. Yeah, so he's been in a lot of other stuff. He was in Harry Potter and Fright Night and all this other stuff, but he At the age of 3, he told his parents that he wanted to become an actor because he enjoyed watching Doctor Who. So this was like literally
Wow.
his dream job of the reason I got into acting was watching Doctor Who as a child. And now I actually get to play this character that got me into acting. And that
That's
probably was an amazing
amazing.
feeling.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
And another,
I was going to say as a
yeah,
short footnote, if you haven't seen Fright Night, David Tennant is hilarious in that movie.
he's hilarious in Harry Potter too.
Also, yeah, he is. Also, Colin Farrell plays the vampire in that. So he's very like over the top, as well as we have talked about with, Bullseye and other stuff like
Yeah.
that. So, but he's
I'm magic.
yeah, I think Tennant
You're
plays a
I'm magic.
TV vampire hunter that they go to enlist his help because they think he's real. And he's just like, no, this was all like for TV. Like, I don't actually, you guys believe in vampires. And then, of course, like they're real and they have to deal with that. But
Well, it's like Galaxy
yeah,
Quest.
he's very, yes, he's very funny in that movie. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so fun fact, he was actually born as David John McDonald, but adopted Tennant as his stage name. But then, due to an issue, McDonald, it's Scottish, I guess. I don't know. But due to an issue with the Screen Actors Guild in the US, they wouldn't let him keep his stage name unless it was his legal name. So rather than have a stage name in the UK and use his legal name in the US, he just changed his name. And now he's David Tennant. So he legally changed his name to a stage name, which is kind of interesting. But then, like, how does Nicolas Cage get away with it? Because that's his stage name, right? Or did he rename himself? I don't know.
He might have legally changed his name. He was born, what, Nicholas Coppola or something like that, I think.
Something like that. I mean, Nick Cage does sound much cooler, but maybe because we're used to it.
It does. Nick Cage.
So,
sweet Christmas.
Yes. Sweet Christmas. Get some coffee. Oh wait, no, we're not going to talk about that. So then we have Matt Smith, who was the youngest person to portray the actor at 26. He was apparently the physical form of Skynet in Terminator Genesis in 2015.
Yes, he was.
I have not seen that, but it sounds interesting.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the living vampire, Lucian or Milo in Morbius in 2022, and a bunch of other stuff. So when Karen Gillan was playing Nebula, she actually had to, I think she actually had to shave her head because they just couldn't get a cap that would work. Well, Matt Smith was also doing something in which he had to shave his head. So there is a part of Doctor Who where both of them are wearing wigs that look like their hair from before they shaved their heads.
Wow, I did not know that.
So that's kind of fun. Next we have Peter Capaldi from 14 to 17. He is Scottish and he was allowed to use his Scottish accent, which is totally just, now we don't care about that. You can use whatever accent you want.
And I know him as the Thinker from James Gunn's The Suicide Squad.
Yep, he was the Thinker. And in 1992, Peter Capaldi auditioned for, but obviously did not get, the role of a certain Benjamin Sisko in Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Really? Wow.
That would have been
really different. It would have been
very different.
Too close to what they did before, having like kind of an older guy with an accent being the captain. I think I don't know.
That would have been close to Patrick Stewart, maybe.
It would have been. Yeah, I feel like he's too much of that same kind of actor. So I think that worked out.
So he also has he originally was in Doctor Who in a 2008 episode, The Fires of Pompeii, with the 10th Doctor and Donna Noble playing like Lobus Caecilius, I think is his name. And so it's weird because he was on screen with the Doctor as a completely different character, and then he was playing the Doctor later. So they kind of like, I don't know if they ever actually addressed it, but I think in the like anniversary special, Tom Baker, who's playing like a museum curator, he's not even playing the Doctor, but he's like, you might find your regeneration start being a little bit different. Like you might start seeing familiar faces that you've seen before. And so I don't know if that was supposed to, be because of that.
That one throwaway line was like that you might look like a guy that lived in Pompeii before the volcano erupted.
Maybe. He also did play the Doctor in a couple spin-offs. So there was a Torchwood spin-off, and then there was some kind of weird like high school spin-off version where he played the Doctor in the first episode, and it's was kind of weird. I didn't really watch it. I just read about it because it sounded really strange.
The Doctor in high school?
Well, he was like, I don't know, like not a science teacher, but like, I don't know. I don't even know. It was weird. So anyway, that takes us to Jodie Whittaker, who from 2018 to 2022 was the first female Doctor. And so there's all kinds of controversy over this, and like, you know, is this the direction we want to go? And is this really right? And, you know, he's been a male character, although he's been, you know, different kind of ethnicities, or, well, I guess Scottish and English, but
yeah.
I think ultimately, like, it really just depends on how they've set up this character or the Time Lords, because until then, they really just kind of regenerated into the same kind of
similar mold.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So this being an alien species that, you know, we really just know enough about to kind of get by in the show, because again, Doctor Who is very fantastical, and they do all kinds of things that they, you know, give you a throwaway line, and that's all the explanation that you get, and you kind of just have to roll with it. Is it within the realm of possibility that they could regenerate back and forth between male and female? I mean, why not? At this point, you almost have to do that, because there's been so many Doctors that you can't, you know, it's not like Star Trek, where it's like, okay, we have a female captain, and we have a captain of this race, and we have a captain of that race, and we have a non-human captain, and you can do all this stuff on these different ships because they're different people. But with the Doctor being the same all the time, you lose that like variation. So I think ultimately it was somewhere where, you know, Doctor Who just, it's going to have to go there, because like I said, you know, with being more varied, but also like, I thought she actually did a really good job as an actress capturing that crazy quirkiness of Doctor Who. So I was like pleasantly surprised to kind of enjoy watching it. Unfortunately, I did not like the companions that she had. They seemed really spacey, and there was this whole family thing they tried to force together, and it just, the writing and the direction of the show, like that part, I really didn't care for. So I haven't seen a lot of her.
But the performance wasn't.
But her performance I actually enjoyed. Yeah. So it was kind of unfortunate, because, you know, it's like, okay, I'll accept this female Doctor, and this actress is doing a good job. Okay, I'll try this. I'll watch this. Oh, I don't really like these episodes. Oh well.
Yeah.
So that brings us to where we are currently, where she has now regenerated, and the face that came out of the TARDIS was the face of David Tennant. And he goes, I recognize these teeth, because when he first became the 10th Doctor, he was like, ooh, new teeth was one of the first things he pointed out. So it was a nice little like callback. But he's like, wait a minute, what? And then that was it. That was the cliffhanger.
Oh, that's all you get?
That was what, like, was that last year before? It seems like it's been forever since they teased that. And then there's going to be like I think like a 3-parter where we're going to see him reunite with Donna Noble, and they're going to have some kind of crazy adventure. And then he's going to regenerate into the 15th Doctor, which we already know is Ncuti Gatwa. And I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Who is he is a Rwandan Scottish actor who's 30 years old.
Okay.
So this will be again a different
seems
direction.
Like Scotland is a good place to get your doctors from, though. Generally.
Yeah.
They seem to have a pretty good track record with their Scottish actors. So yeah.
So I guess he's actually the first one who's been born outside the United Kingdom to play the Doctor. And I haven't really like I kind of fell out of Doctor Who really during the kind of Peter Capaldi saga. Like some of that was hit or miss for me. And then when we got to Jodie Whittaker, and I was like, I don't care for this style of writing, I was kind of done at that point. So I haven't been following it as closely. But the writer who wrote during the David Tennant and part of the Matt Smith run, Russell T Davies, is actually back. on the
Oh,
show.
that's good.
So we've got an experienced writer who's written really good Doctor Who stuff before, and we have David Tennant coming back, which I think is a way to say, okay, you know, everybody come on back. We're going to throw you a bone here and show you this character that everybody, you know, loved and enjoyed, and then we're going to do our next thing. So it's sort of like a little bridge to maybe bring people back, and then we'll see where Doctor Who goes from there. So should be fun.
I mean, the strongest appeal of Doctor Who to me is that ever-changing aspect of it, you know, that they can constantly reinvent it and do something new, because they're always going to be able to go, you know, he's regenerated into a new person. And so while in some ways that may not be great for the actor, because what if they're doing fantastic on the show and then they're like, well, your time's done, we need to get somebody else in here, it also probably keeps them from being typecast, you know, like that, like happened to that one guy that did it for like way too long or whatever. I mean, so I mean, I think overall it's a really strong concept. And even though it hasn't always connected with me as much as some other sci-fi franchises, I totally respect like the history that it has and like the lore and everything. Like it's definitely a valid and worthy franchise. And, you know, I mean, it wouldn't have lasted as long as it has if it wasn't, you know. So
right. And it's had its ups and downs, and I mean Star Trek's kind of had that too, but
for sure,
it's really nice that it's funny because like there's not really a whole lot of like, I mean, there is continuity to a point, but there's not as much as there is with Star Trek, where it's like certain events are very specific to the timeline, or like even Star Wars. It's like we have eras that, you know, your story has to take place in one of these eras, or before or after. You can't just drop in a story with Darth Vader and be like, oh, the Empire is gone and Darth Vader is a relic. You know, no, he was during the Empire, and then he was gone with the Empire. So you can't like do those things out of context. So there's like the sort of base rules, but with the Doctor living as long as he does, I mean, you can have a Doctor Who who plays you know, an actor who plays the Doctor for, you know, 2 years or even 1 year with Eccleston, or even McGann, who only got that one movie but has been in audio dramas. I mean, his audio dramas were super popular, and you know, all kinds of additional stuff where they get to play the Doctor sort of out of that, and they can go on all the adventures they want because there's so much time in between, and it's time travel that there's no, you know, you don't have to keep track of time. There's no
limitation on it. I think if I were a writer, it would be an incredibly freeing franchise to work on, because it's like, so I have all this history, but I don't have to be constrained by it, basically. You know, so it's like you get all of the good without the bad. With you know, the challenge of writing Trek is, well, there's all this history, and so you kind of have to make it fit if you're not doing something in the future. And even then, you're going to want to see some kind of connectivity back to, you know, what happened before. So
well, and when we sign on a Starfleet crew, this is our crew for the show. And maybe some of the tertiary members will change, or every once in a while, you know, the tactical officer will go and we'll have somebody new. You know, sometimes there's big things like that. But overall, the general crew, we have the same ones from the beginning, 7 years later, and all the movies and everything like that. Whereas they don't really rotate out the main cast members. Whereas with Doctor Who, you could be a writer on it 1 year writing Doctor Who, and now a new actor is coming. And now you have to take what you were writing, but write it in a different voice because it's a different actor playing that same role. So it, you know, it's like you have this change that like really changes the show. So it would be very, very versatile. Whereas that would be an interesting concept for Star Trek, where you have, you know, a series that goes for maybe 10 years, and every 2 years you have to change the captain. Maybe the captain goes somewhere, the commander gets promoted, and a new commander takes over, and now you have to deal with that. And that could be a fun concept for a show.
Yeah, oddly enough, the Star Trek series that I think is showing the most lasting change from episode to episode is probably Lower Decks, because we've seen them be promoted to Lieutenant JG now, and now we're seeing how their responsibilities have changed. They allowed Boimler to even be transferred off the ship at one point. I mean,
they're in new quarters, so their environment's a little different.
With moving the pieces around a little bit more. which is fun to see.
And they're in the future. They're not a prequel, so they can almost do whatever they want.
They are.
Finally.
It's very true.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fun Doctor Who after show. Hopefully you enjoyed sort of the history. And I mean, there's a lot more to, you know, that we could talk about Doctor's episodes and continuity and who are the Daleks and who are these people and the Cybermen and blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's a lot of that stuff and events that happen, but I think that's something that you really just have to kind of experience for yourself. So just with the overview of the Doctors, it gives you a point too, if you're like, oh, that, you know, James Bond type Doctor sounds interesting. I think I'll go back and watch some of those. There's actually something called BritBox, which is like Netflix for Americans to watch British TV, I think. So that's another subscription thing that you can pay per month, just like all the other subscription stuff. And you can watch all the classic Doctor Who episodes. So if that's something you're interested in, check it out. But otherwise, you should check out our podcast and the after shows and everything else, and like us. Subscribe. Give us comments. Tell us how awesome we are.
And click the little bell on YouTube so it gives you notifications about 50% of the time.
Exactly. You need all the notifications.
That's right.
Every time we post something.
Well, everybody. Oh, wait. That's the wrong my franchise. What do I have here? I have a pen. What is that?
I can't make the noise that the TARDIS makes.
I thought the noise that it made was.
No, that's the noise the fans make whenever you mention Doctor Who.
Whenever I see the police box traveling, I always hear that music, so I don't know.
Dun 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 dun. Woo!
I wish I had a police box so I could join in. I just have to fly Hawkman around.
Everybody, shake your police boxes. All right. Well, we'll who you later.
That's right. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thanks. Peace out.
Peace out. Comment.